Okay, a couple more things around the NFL. One consistent theme of this season. Cleveland did not need Deshaun Watson to be a top 5 quarterback. They just needed him to be a top 15 quarterback. They just needed him to be some of those Jimmy Garoppolo versions in San Francisco. Not the guy we've seen this year in Oakland or Vegas, but just a middle of the road with some above average performances and let the defense cook. And early on in that game, and honestly through the second half, it's 24-9 after Beckham scores. You're like, God, Cleveland, their quarterback situation is a disaster. Now, your boy, like many other people on the social media streets, might have been talking a lot of shit. And then they came storming back. Now, Lamar Jackson had an awful pick in the second half. The Ravens just kind of stumbled. And Deshaun Watson was awesome. And relative to his Browns career, easily the best Browns performance for him. 14 of 14 in the second half. He ran in a 2-point conversion. He threw a touchdown. And ultimately, they don't even need him to be that good against most teams. Obviously, the Ravens are one of the better teams in the NFL, but they're going to play teams that aren't that good. They just need him to be middle of the road. And I just saw before I started recording, he's having an MRI on his ankle. He's pretty beat up as a player, right? From potential concussion to the shoulder injury, now an ankle injury. They just need him to be solid. They don't need him to be, as Dabo Swinney once said, Michael Jordan or Superman. Just be middle of the pack. Now, they're not paying for middle of the pack, but we've talked about the cap implications. Their team is so good on defense. Myles Garrett, to me, is easily the defensive player of the year so far this season. Their DBs are awesome. I mean, Newsome, that pick six, now it fell right into his arm, but that ability, they're a fun team to watch on defensively. Now, offensively, the quarterback play, when it looked like P.J. Walker was going to come in for a second, I do think that's a better win for the Browns than it is a bad loss for the Ravens, though you could argue you're up 24-9 at home in the second half and you're a fucking powerhouse. You can't lose the game, but divisional games, weird stuff happens. Their quarterback, we can't forget, he is owed after, the beginning of this year, $229 million. So at one point in time, he was a really good player, but props to Cleveland. Props to Stefanski. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on this franchise, right? Simply, there just is. Because if they were to miss the playoffs, which it doesn't look like they're going to, coach is for sure fired. You could argue, depending on how it looks in the playoffs, a lot of heat's on Stefanski. Jim Schwartz, the defense is awesome. If they were to fire Stefanski, you think they would just elevate him. It's kind of been his MO in his career to try to backstab a little bit. He attempted to do that to Doug Peterson, but then Doug won a Super Bowl. I don't know if that's going to happen to Stefanski. Like, I don't think the Browns are going to win a Super Bowl. But if their quarterback play is just solid, their defense is so good, I don't think it's out of the realm possibility that they make some serious noise in the AFC playoffs. And let's face it, yesterday was a freaking great day for them. Bengals lose at the end of the game to the Texans. They are playing the Ravens, right? So two teams that they're trying to catch. I wouldn't put my money on them winning the division, but when your defense is that dominant and at any moment can score, can create a turnover, I don't know, man. I saw this team beat the shit out of the 49ers. Not a big – people think I'm an Ohio hater. I don't like Ohio State. Nothing against the Browns. I actually have a lot of respect for the passion of their fan base. Not a big Deshaun Watson guy after everything that happened. Not going to find myself rooting for him, but like Stefanski, Jim Schwartz clearly is a fantastic defensive coordinator. Not a huge Flying J guy either. Not rooting for that ownership. But the Browns, if I'm a Browns fan, I'm pumping my chest high. And the Ravens, God, they always do this. Every time you're like, they're in cruise control. Nope, not so fast. Lamar, you can't turn the ball over. You can't, and that's kind of always been his bugaboo in some of these big spots. It's why they've underachieved in the playoffs. I was picking him to win the MVP a couple of weeks ago. The great part about football, man, you only get one of these a week. Things change really fast. Opinions change. It's very fluid. It's like the stock market. You can't just own yourself to one take because at a moment's notice, an injury, poor play can derail you. I mean, Ronnie Stanley goes down in that game. Who knows his status? Now what's going on Thursday? They play the Bengals. Pretty big game for both those teams. I mean, borderline must win for the Bengals given where they stand in the standings, in that division. Speaking of must win, there are no must wins anymore for New England. That was I watched way too much of that game. An utter embarrassment. And I remember when the 49ers fired Jim Harbaugh, they claimed mutually departed, and they went to Jim Tom Sula and then the Chip Kelly. The fan base became very apathetic. You know, it's like, we're not going to consume this. You're not going to make money off us. We despise what we're watching. And it's different in New England because Bill's still there. And any New England fan, we've argued a lot about this on the mailbag over the year about Patriot fans. Like, I'm sorry, you got to suck it up. These just suck, but you had 20 freaking years that every single fan base would sign up for gladly. So this is usually how it goes. But it's as ugly as it possibly could be. I mean, their offense is literally unwatchable. Mac Jones is an unwatchable player, right? At least if you're a Bears fan, you're like, well, we got 2 picks. They're going to be in the top 5 or 6. We're probably going to get the number 1 overall pick. We're going to fire Eberflus. So, yeah, this franchise, historically, you can't put much faith into them, but at least we're about to have hope. Like the Patriots right now don't feel that hopeful, but the only thing to hope for, and listen, I'm a pro Belichick guy. I will defend him because I think it's so easy, and I told Coward this on Sunday night, and I'll say this till the day I die. Well, what's he without Brady? Well, what would Walsh have been without Joe Montana? What would Mike Holmgren been in Green Bay without Brett Favre? Right? Tony Dungy's in the Hall of Fame. Might want to shake Peyton Manning's hand. Right? Sean Payton just got $90 million from the Denver Broncos. Thank you, Drew Brees. Right? Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game in a long time. Last I checked, when he had young peak Ben Roethlisberger, rattling off a lot of victories. I mean, making some runs in the playoffs. So to be a good coach, you have to have a good quarterback. John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl. Joe Flacco got as hot as humanly possible. Same thing with Tom Coughlin. Eli Manning, for a month and a half straight, became the best quarterback in the league. So to be a good coach, to be a championship winning coach, you need a great quarterback. You need a Hall of Fame guy or a really good player to get just, otherworldly hot. So I'm not acting like Belichick's the village idiot. But listen, everyone in the business I used to work in will say, like, people when they were winning championships wanted out. Why? They didn't pay that much money if you were in scouting, and he didn't listen to you. So you just were kind of irrelevant. Now, you got to build your resume because you worked for the Patriots. You probably got a Super Bowl or 2, and it changed the course of your life. But when you were there, it was miserable. But it was worth it. Like, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. There was some gold when you were digging. You're like, I see where this is going. This isn't just a pointless exercise, which can happen sometimes in football. As a player, as a coach, as an exec in the NFL, when you're part of shitty teams, you're like, what is the point of any of this? And with New England, there always was a point. We're going to the AFC Championship. More than likely, we're going to the Super Bowl, and there's like a 40% chance we're going to win the fucking thing. Those days are so long gone, it's not even funny. They're an embarrassment. And I've said this over and over with Bill, and I get it. Like, he's comfortable around his people. I've known some old people that had a lot of money. They usually don't change their ways, become more progressive and open-minded in their 70s. It's not the way the world works. They usually stick with what's got them there. And a lot of times, as the world changes in any industry, that can be your downfall. You got to be willing to pivot. Like, ultimately, Pete Carroll, he's a good example. Like, Pete Carroll hadn't changed at all. He just literally got rid of Russell Wilson. He shorted Russell Wilson as a player. Turned out he was right. Then they hit on a bunch of draft picks after that trade, and they already had some impact players. But Pete Carroll's the same guy. It's not like his coaching philosophy has changed at all. Their change and their pivot back to success was just punting on Russell Wilson and being right about it. Belichick has been wrong basically everything he's done, from Matt Patricia to Mac Jones to elevating even Bill O'Brien this year. Like, nothing's working. And I think that's a good example of the only coaches he will go to are people he knows, right? It's like, bro, you have to look outside yourself. But he's proven, like, it's pointless to even say it. He's never going to do that. He never will do that. The other conversation is like, just get him a GM, get him a guy. He's not listening to anybody at this point in time. Like, just fire him. Just move on. We all know anyone who was dumb enough, beside a Colts fan or Patriot fan, to get up early. For those of you on the East Coast, not that early. For those of us on the West Coast, you got to make a little bit of an effort to watch the first half of that game. Can't watch that game and think like, yeah, I'd give Bill another go around. his resume speaks for itself, but he's been paid for that. Like he was competent. That's what the money was for. Won a lot of games, was paid a shitload of money, is still paid a shitload of money. But they're headed for 2 or 3 wins. And Mac Jones is just an unplayable guy. And I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. Drafting him at 15 is a joke. I said it when Kyle Shanahan thought about drafting him at 3. That would be the most arrogant draft pick in the history of professional sports. Luckily, he didn't do it, and the guy he drafted is a 3rd stringer. Like, all those quarterbacks suck. But to me, Mac Jones, historically, is like a 3rd or 4th round guy. And just because you have success at a powerhouse program doesn't mean you're going to be good in the NFL. His traits did not translate, especially when you don't have much talent around him. And we're seeing him get worse and worse. And that's part of anytime you lose confidence. I don't care what you do in life, let alone play quarterback, which is extremely hard. You're going to have no shot. And he doesn't have any confidence. He doesn't have the skills to overcome that. And you're watching a guy who's destined to be a backup. That's what Mac Jones is. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a hell of a profession. Ask Chase Daniels what it's like to be a 14-year backup. Make a lot of money. I mean, you get to do some fun stuff. Not everyone's meant to be a starting quarterback. Let's face it. I'd say 10 of the starting quarterbacks are typically guys holding on for dear life for their starting quarterback. Right? There's, of the 32 guys, there's 12 to 14 that are just their starting quarterback. Definitely 7 or 8 that you feel really good about. The next 7, you know it's very hard to upgrade. And then everyone else, you're constantly looking and will upgrade at the moment's notice. And Mac Jones at the bottom end of that, really trending toward being a backup. Just like Baker Mayfield, just like a lot of these guys, Sam Darnold. And you're in the NFL. You're one of the best 45 quarterbacks. That's what he is. But when you expect him to carry and make plays for a good team, everyone's like, I can't believe he made that pass to end the game. You can't? Have you not been watching him? That is the pass that he throws right to the other team. Whoever is wearing the different color, the other jersey, in big spots, that's who gets the ball. The Patriots aren't going to catch the ball. Someone else on the other team is. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm not trying to be even sarcastic or make fun of him. That's just an objective fact. He throws the ball to the other team constantly. And a team that is just not very talented has no shot. So let's face it, Bill has not been a GM these last several years. His coaching staff has been abysmal, been bottom in the NFL. And now his quarterback play is atrocious. So yeah, this is what you get. And if you're the Crafts, what would Bill have done to this version of Bill Belichick in his heyday? Fired him. Belichick's getting fired or traded or just not the coach of the New England Patriots. Something that was kind of a bright spot. And listen, I defended this move because I was like, I think there's a lot of good that can come out of it. The one negative is he gets injured and you owe him a ton of money, but you were already cool with doing that when you paid him the contract. So when Kyler, and let's face it, all these organizations, the coach and GM only have so much power. If the owner wants to do something, the owner's going to do something. So the moment owner signed Kyler Murray to that check and that contract, like he was going to get some shots, as he should. So when Kyler Murray was named the starting quarterback essentially this week and then played yesterday, like, 1, he could look good and become a tradable asset. 2, he could look good and you like him and you just keep him. And to me, that outweighs any of the negative stuff because you were already cool when you paid him the money that the whole thing could be a disaster. Hell, they knew it when they did it because they gave him the video game contract or clause in the contract. So yesterday, I was pretty impressed for a guy that hasn't played in a year to go 19-32. And to me, the impressive part is physically, I don't know if he's 100%, but he's definitely closer to 100 than he is 75, 80. He looked explosive as a runner. Here's the thing. Like, my issue with Bryce Young, I just don't see anything, right? I think for him to be a solid player, he's going to have the perfect team around him, perfect coach. Kyler's attributes are elite. He has an elite arm. He has elite speed. He's a really accurate quarterback. He can throw from the pocket and without. Now, he's not, I wouldn't stake my claim as the number one guy I would want, but I do understand why people like him. I've seen him, I've seen him light up the 49ers. I've seen him light up a lot of good teams over when he's playing well. Like, he is a big-time talent. And I think you saw some of that on display. Now, the one negative of playing him is you're going to win a lot of these swing games. If Kyler Murray doesn't play against the Atlanta Falcons, no matter how big of a disaster their kind of quarterback turnstile situation is, Arizona loses. You play them in a lot of these games, like when you play the Rams, when you play teams like Atlanta, that could be the difference of 6 wins or 3 wins. And I think they're cool with doing that because that's probably a positive for them. They got a couple picks because remember they traded down with Houston. So they have their pick, which probably going to be like in the early 20s. So if their pick ends up at 10, you got 2 picks in the top 20 and maybe just keep Kyler and roll with it. I think that is definitely on the table. And if you want to, you always could trade him. And he keeps making plays like that. You don't think the Atlanta Falcons or one of these teams will give you, I don't know, his contract's big, but 2 2s and a 3? Maybe you get a 1, but you definitely, because of if they take the money, I think definitely get some second round picks. So you could reload, pivot, and draft one of these quarterbacks and just kind of restart your franchise. So I think their options are plentiful. And to me, a lot of good options. And like I said, if I was a betting man right now and we only have one game to go off of, the way they named him a team captain, maybe they like him. Maybe that's not fake. Maybe they legitimately like him as a guy because we can only go off our experiences around other individuals, hearsay and perception from other people. Obviously, that can influence us. But then once we're around the guy, if we do like him and things are going right, why wouldn't we feel strongly about that individual? Now, you got to prove it over time when there's a lot of negativity surrounding you, as there is with Kyler, with some of his previous relationships with the head coach and some of the teammates. But maybe he's doing a really good job. And let's face it, if you're a competitor, some of us guys mature a little later. If you get humbled in the way he did, like everyone was talking shit about him. And a lot of it was self-inflicted, from the video game clause to the way he acted to just the whole situation, to getting everyone fired. Like ultimately those guys were fired because of him. And maybe it's humbling as a young guy. Maybe it makes you look in the mirror and want to change and want to improve. And sometimes that happens. Like not everyone that was, this guy's kind of a D-bag, just a D-bag for life. Some people change. Like, actually, this guy's really grown up. That can't happen. So I'm not saying that has. I don't know. I don't have any inside information here. Jonathan Gannon is not my buddy. But I do think that is potentially on the table. A couple quick college things. First and foremost with Jim Harbaugh, if you're going to make a decision as a leader, have some fucking balls. Like if you are going to follow the mob, and there's nothing I respect less than people to just follow the mob from leadership positions, like have conviction in what you want to do. Don't get influenced by the yappers, by everyone talking, whether it's companies based on social media, whether it's all these coaches to Tony Petitti in the Big Ten. If you want to suspend them, listen, that's your prerogative. You're in that position. Do it. But suspend them. Like you're suspended for the end of the season. You can come back in the playoffs or whatever, right? Because we don't have any jurisdiction over that. But every Big Ten game moving forward, you're not allowed to coach. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it because, as I've been saying forever, everyone's cheating. Welcome to business. Every fucking person's pushing the envelope. Some people push it farther, but I'm watching the show on Uber right now on Netflix. Highly recommend it. It's a good watch. The coach from Friday Night Lights plays a big role in the show as like an investor in Uber. But it's like they would not have became what they became without pushing the envelope. Some of it you could argue was illegal, but all these companies that are running America probably did a lot of illegal activity, right? Just like you, if you're listening to this and you run a small business, you've done things that can make you uncomfortable, right? You're like, should we do this? And sometimes it works out great. And you look back 5 years and you laugh about it. You're like, can you believe when we did that? That's the way the world works. The action's on the edges, baby. So I don't have an issue with what they did because I also think everyone's doing it, at least to degrees of it. So anyone acting high and mighty, I'm just calling bullshit on. But when I look at the suspension, like you can't let him coach during the week and then suspend him on game day. That is just gutless. Like I view you as a complete pussy. And I don't know anything about this Tony Petitti guy, but all I need to know is the actions which he gave on the suspension. Like he was forced from the coaches to do something, but he didn't want to go all the way because he didn't think he could. Maybe he didn't have the evidence. I don't know, but he didn't do it. So I just think it's so stupid. And hopefully for all of our sake, like, listen, I full disclosure, like I have no problem telling you my biases. I hate the Lakers. I don't like Ohio State. Honestly, I don't really have a problem historically with Ohio State. I just don't really like Ryan Day. I don't even know why. I just don't really like him. Maybe it's the way he dyes his beard. Maybe it's, as Harbaugh said, born on third base. I don't really like his coaching style. They've been better this year defensively, obviously, but I can't get behind it. Chip Kelly guy, I don't know. But I root against them. But this is even my bias for Harbaugh, which I am a fan. I just think it's stupid. And I don't know how you couldn't disagree with going either fully suspend him or do nothing and wait for the quote-unquote due process to play out. USC is a joke. It really is. And anyone that listened to the podcast with Coward that I did on Sunday night, like I do believe this. I'm not just saying this. If I was Lincoln Riley, I would look at USC and be like, listen, this is not going to work out. I belong in Texas and go to coach Texas A&M. I think that would be a much better fit. And I do believe, I'm not like just saying this, like it doesn't work. And I've believed this for a while. Where you're from in college football influences how high your upside is. It's why where I'm from, the Pac-12, the West Coast, most of our best coaches have been West Coast guys, right? Pete Carroll, born in San Francisco, went to University of Pacific. Chris Peterson, Jeff Tedford, LA guy. UC Davis, Fresno State guy. So when he kicked ass at Cal and he kicked out at Washington and Boise State, that's where they're from. Michael Bellotti, coach at Oregon that resurrected that program. You know where he's from? Went to UC Davis. No different in the South. Kirby Smart, where do you think he's from? Steve Spurrier, where do you think he's from? Nick Saban's dad owned a gas station in West Virginia. Fits the South. Understands the South. Where's he had success? LSU, Alabama. Right? In theory, Jimbo should have worked, but he just lost his touch, or maybe he was always kind of overrated. But Jimbo's only going to work in the South. Dabo Swinney, where does he work? The South. So to me, where you're from matters. And this Lincoln Riley thing just doesn't work. USC needs a little juice. He hates defense. The program was built on defense. In his heyday, they had like all 11 of their guys were NFL players. And not just any NFL players, highly drafted NFL players. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I just don't see him turning it around. And I just don't see it working out. I really don't. And it's nothing against the guy. Philosophically, we don't exactly view football the same way, but I have always been a Lincoln Riley fan. And I think for him to have the Southwest is where he belongs. From Texas, had a lot of success at Oklahoma. To me, he would have much more success at Texas A&M. And honestly, Lane Kiffin makes a lot of sense at USC. More of a bright lights guy, more willing to just handle everything that comes with it. Like, he's peaked at Ole Miss. You win 8-9 games, you get him ranked in the top 25. That's as good as that program is. And I know he's been at USC before, and I know he got fired on the tarmac, but I personally, I think those two fits make a lot more sense than Lincoln at USC and Lane, who's, I got news for you Ole Miss fans, has been trying to get out for a couple of years. Now, he's got some baggage off the field, makes some ADs uncomfortable. When Dan Lanning got the job at Oregon, Lane wanted it, and they went with Lanning over Lane. But Lane's a legitimate head coach. Jaden Daniels, his stats are stupid. I watched a lot of that Florida LSU game. I'd be lying if I've watched much of LSU the last probably month. Obviously, I've seen the guy's stats, watched him early in the season. I mean, I followed his career. He's from ASU. Sometimes the transfer portal, the smartest thing you can ever do. Like, here's where I respect. A lot of people have all these opinions on NIL and transfer portal. Like Jaden Daniels, think about the guy started at ASU, a program that sucks. Herm Edwards has been cool to me whenever I've been around him. But think about this. Herm Edwards coached ASU for 5 years. He gets fired. He goes back to TV, and you go, God, I bet 5 years in college football, the Pac-12 recruiting, they don't let him touch anything in college. Why? He doesn't know anything. He didn't even know the players on his own roster. So Jaden Daniels gets out of there, goes to LSU, and has become, I don't want to say the Heisman frontrunner, because I think betting-wise, Bo Nix still is, but he's having an incredible season. And for a team, I mean, LSU, to me, when I think about him historically, really good defense. That ain't the case here. Without him, who knows where they'd be? I have a lot of respect when guys transfer to better schools. Isn't that the point? We all want to do better for ourselves. If we're in a shitty neighborhood, what do you want to get to? A better neighborhood. If you're making 50 grand, what do you ultimately want? 150 grand. If you're making 200 grand, what do you want? 600 grand. Like, you're always aspiring for more. So if I'm at ASU, why wouldn't I want to go to LSU? And before that was, you were allowed to transfer, but it was so much more difficult. You had to sit out a year. And I think it forced a lot of guys to probably want to leave, but hold on. And listen, there are parts of it that I don't love, But I completely understand this move, and it's worked wonders for this guy because you keep having these moments in the SEC. I think when the dust settles, he's going to get drafted in the first round. And last but not least, I mean, speaking of USC, I watched about 3/4 of that Oregon USC game. It was JV versus varsity. And listen, USC is not very good, but it wasn't the score did not reflect what I witnessed. Honestly, if it wasn't for Caleb Williams pulling plays out of his ass, Oregon mollywhopped those guys. They have a national championship level team. Now, are they going to win it? I don't know if I'd feel great putting my money on them. I still think Georgia is a mother. Whoever comes out of the Ohio State-Michigan game is going to be really, really tough. Texas's team, I don't trust their coach, but their team is just incredibly talented, though I think I saw their running back got injured. It's hard to know exactly Florida State, but Florida State definitely doesn't suck. But you watch Oregon, and they're going to get their chance, play Washington in the a rematch in the championship game in Las Vegas. That game's going to be fucking awesome. Can't wait for that thing. But it's on the table. The Dan Lanning has a shot, second year. Remember, Bob Stoops, second year at Oklahoma, national championship. You do something like that, it changes the course of your career as a coach. And, you can, some of these names, A&M's throwing out there, like, we're interested in Dan Campbell. No one leaves a good NFL job. And a good NFL job is just one you're winning at to go to college football. An NIL transfer portal. News for you. Dan Campbell should get an extension, pay him $12, $15 million a year. He ain't leaving the Lions for your job. And if I'm Dan Lanning, like, I'm just not leaving Oregon. They can pay me. I'm going to the Big Ten, so I'm in one of the main two conferences. And it's just a little easier route. The other thing, why would I want to deal with A&M? Some of these programs have a false sense of who they are. Like A&M, you're just not that great of a football program. You're never going to be. You're going to have some moments. You're going to produce some NFL guys. You're never going to be Alabama. You're never going to be LSU. You're never going to be Georgia. Like, hell, I don't ever see you becoming what Oregon's become. You can get great players. Something's just off. I don't know what. I've never even been there, but I've just watched college football for 30 years. And I always hear, I got all this money. They got all these recruits. Like, I don't give a fuck. They stink. And I have no faith that they're going to get this right.